Spanish general election takes place this Sunday, April the 28th. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 major parties, what they stand for, what the differences are between them. I'm going to talk about what has happened in Spain since the transition to democracy, the rise and fall of the various parties, the corruption scandals, the economy, and how we've arrived at where we are now. And finally, I'm going to talk briefly about what's happened in this election campaign and what we can expect to happen on Sunday. So starting off, we have the 5 major parties. I'll go through each of these individually in more detail in a moment, but first to give a brief overview. Podemos are a left-wing democratic socialist party. PSOE are the mainstream centre-left. Ciudadanos are a centrist stroke centre-right party. PP are the traditional centre-right party. Historically in Spain, power has alternated between the PSOE and the PP. Podemos, Ciudadanos and Vox are newer and smaller parties. Vox are a breakaway faction basically of the PP. They are a national conservative centre-right party. Let's start with Podemos. Their leader is Pablo Iglesias. The name Podemos means we can. They have an electoral alliance with the IU, the Izquierda Unida. That electoral alliance is called Unidos Podemos, United We Can. Now recently they changed that to the feminine form, Unidas Podemos. So that, I think, tells you everything you need to know about this party. They're very much the party of social justice. They're quite a radical party. They contain Trotskyists, radical feminists. There's a strong anti-capitalist ethos in the party. On most issues, you'll have Podemos on one extreme and you will have Vox on the other extreme. The roots of this party go back to 2011 when the Spanish economy was really in a bad way. You had the 15M anti-austerity protests, and this provided the impetus for a new party to the left of the PSOE. And Podemos was formed in 2014. Around 25% of members of the PSOE left and joined this new party. They have quite left-wing views on migration. They want to loosen family reunification rules. They want to issue humanitarian visas. They want to close Spain's migrant holding centres. When it comes to Catalonia, they want to hold a referendum which would provide a new status for Catalonia within Spain. None of the 5 parties support independence, but Podemos are the only party who even support a referendum, and even they don't support independence. PSOE, they are led by Pedro Sanchez. He's the current Prime Minister of Spain. The name stands for the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party. They're not a socialist party, at least not anymore. They're a centre-left social democrat party now. Like Podemos, they want to increase taxes on higher earners, whereas the other 3 parties want to reduce those taxes. When it comes to the issue of feminism, 11 of Pedro Sanchez's 17 cabinet members are women. So 11 of his 17 ministers are women. This is a record for anywhere in the world. When the cabinet was being sworn in June 2018, the oath that the ministers make, it contains a reference to the Consejo de Ministros, the Council of Ministers. And most of the ministers changed that, and they changed it to Consejo de Ministros y Ministras. So they included the feminine plural form, even though it's not necessary. So you can see that in Spain, in Spanish, the language, the gender of language is an issue, and this is something which is absent in English, but it can be an issue in Spanish. They want to devolve more power to Catalonia. They don't want to hold a referendum. When it comes to migrants, Pedro Sanchez was the Prime Minister in June 2018. He'd just been recently voted in when the Aquarius affair happened. If you've been following my Salvini videos, you might be aware that in June 2018, Salvini refused permission for the NGO ship Aquarius to dock in Italy. There were 630 migrants on board. This was really Salvini's first high-profile action that he took to try and reduce the numbers of migrants arriving in Italy on these NGO ships. It was eventually Spain who agreed to take these migrants. The ship went to Valencia. Now, since then, Pedro Sanchez has stepped back a bit. They've started to take a harder line on migration, and one of the reasons why is the numbers coming to Spain across the Mediterranean have been going up and up. In 2018 it was 60,000. Spain is now the number one receiver of migrants crossing the Mediterranean. The number in 2018 was twice what it had been in 2017, and it was 4 times what it had been in 2016. So that Sanchez and the PSOE have said that they've started to change their policies due to the exceptional nature of the numbers that are arriving. Ciudadanos, they're led by Albert Rivera. The name means citizens. They were originally a Catalan party. They were formed in Catalonia in 2005. They were originally called Citizens of Catalonia. They only became a national party in 2013. Now, this is a party which is all about opposing Catalan, the rising tide of Catalan separatism, the rising tide of Catalan nationalism, and the increasing anti-Spanish rhetoric. Not just separatism, but also issues like the use of Catalan as the sole medium of instruction in schools, and the use of Catalan for public services, etc. Ciudadanos have gained a lot of support because they've been seen as being more effective in standing up to the separatists than the PSOE, and particularly the PP, because whilst Ciudadanos were originally a centre party, maybe even centre-left originally, a liberal party, they increasingly have been moving to the right, and they're seen now really as a centre-right party. After the election, they want to ask the Catalan regional government whether they respect the Spanish constitution, and depending on the answer that they get, they may or they may not suspend Catalonia's regional autonomy. The PP, the Partido Popular, the People's Party, they're led by Pablo Casado. In relation to Catalonia, they want to introduce a temporary partial suspension of Catalonia's autonomy. The PP are really at a low ebb at the moment. They've been hit hard by the Gürtel corruption scandal. I'll talk about that more in the next section. Vox, I'm going to talk most about this party. They're the party that I support. I also think they're the most interesting party. Podemos and Ciudadanos have had interesting stories as well, but their growth has been in the past, in previous elections. This here is the first election where Vox has been a major party. The name means voice in Latin. They split from the PP in 2013, formed by people who left the PP. The reasons why they left were tax hikes. The PP was introducing tax hikes that they opposed, and also they wanted a firmer line taken against Catalonia. Their leader is Santiago Abascal. He's from Bilbao. He's from a political family. Both he and his father have been threatened by ETA in the past. Abascal carries a Smith & Wesson on his person at all times for protection. He's well known for this. Another founding member of Vox is José Antonio Ortega Lara. He's a former prison guard who was once taken hostage and held for 532 days by ETA in pretty dreadful conditions. So you can see that, like Ciudadanos, opposition to separatists is in the DNA of this party. They have very strong credentials in this area. The Vox want to go further than the PP or Ciudadanos. Their long-term aim is to permanently suspend all 19 regional assemblies, not just Catalonia. So they're very much a centrist party, a centralist party. They want to deport illegal immigrants. They also want to deport legal immigrants who have committed serious crimes or who are repeat offenders. They want to introduce policies to increase the birth rate. They're socially conservative. They oppose same-sex marriage. They want to replace that with a civil union for same-sex couples. They're pro-life. They oppose Spain's gender violence law. This is a pretty controversial law in Spain, certainly amongst people on the right. Vox say that this is a law which is biased against men, it's unfair against men, but they're the only party who opposes this. Ciudadanos and Partido Popular, they do not oppose the gender violence law. Feminism is a big issue in Spain. It's probably a bigger issue in Spain than it is in any other country in Europe. Vox take a really hard line against this. They talk about supremacist feminism. They talk about gender ideology. They say the gender pay gap doesn't exist. It was invented by feminist organizations. Recently, the leader of Vox in Andalusia said that the gender pay gap was fake news. Ciudadanos and PP, on the other hand, they not only do they accept the gender pay gap, but they talk about tackling it. Vox talk a lot about Reconquista, that there needs to be a Reconquista of Spain. Here's Abascal in Covadonga, which is where the the historic Reconquista began in the early 700s. This was the first victory by the Christians against the Moors. When they talk about this, they don't mean literally expelling Muslims or expelling migrants. I mean, if you read what Abascal says here, it gives you a good idea of what the type of thing that they mean. The Reconquista starts for Spain of its unity, of freedom, and of common sense. So they're really talking about taking the country back from the left, from separatists, and from the PP, who they call the cowardly right. Now, having said that, Vox do talk about Islam, and obviously they talk about immigrants as well. Javier Ortega-Smith, who is the general secretary, basically the number 2 in the party, he talks a lot about Spain's Christian history and about the Battle of Lepanto, which took place in the 16th century when an alliance of Christian states defeated the Ottoman Turks. Vox support bullfighting, not a policy I'm crazy about personally. Here's a video of Abascal out riding horses with Morante de la Puebla, who's a famous bullfighter in Spain. Now, this video went viral. It was filmed by one of de la Puebla's companions. They put a filter on it. They added some music from The Lord of the Rings. Vox then tweeted it from their official account and it went viral. Vox supporters love this. There's a very strong meme tradition surrounding a meme culture surrounding Vox, but they were also lampooned about this. Here is a Spanish satirical comedy show lampooning Abascal. Let's talk now about the history of Spain since the transition to democracy. The first democratic election took place in 1977. The column on the left represents the various elections that have taken place. The parties, a quick reminder, Podemos, left-wing, PSOE, centre-left, Ciudadanos, or centre/centre-right, PP, traditional centre-right, Vox, national conservative centre-right. I've left out a few parties, a few smaller parties here to keep things simple. I've also left out the UCD, who were the most popular party in the first 2 elections, but then fizzled out and no longer exist. The numbers represent the percentages that the parties got in those elections, and the colours rather, mean that party formed the government. So in 1982, the PSOE formed the government after the election. So the first 2 elections, the UCD, the Union de Centro Democrático, they've got 34 and 35%. They finished first. The prime minister during this period was a man called Adolfo Suarez. During the second term, the economy was really struggling. ETA terrorism was becoming a big problem. There was an attempted coup. And at the 1982 elections, the party, the UCD, which was splitting at this stage, was really hammered at that election. And over the course of the next few years, it fizzled out. And from 1982 on, you have the start of the 2-party era. The PSOE won 4 elections in a row. The prime minister during this period was Felipe González. In 1996, the PP got in for the first time, José María Aznar. At this point, we need to talk about the Spanish economy. This is the GDP growth rate. You can see that in 1993, the Spanish economy bottomed out and then it started to recover. And it really took off from 96 onwards, 96 to late 2007. Those were the happy years for Spain. And then Spain was really hard hit by the recession. As you can see, those were some really tough years from 2008 till about 2014, 2015. So that was the environment in which Podemos came about. Really high unemployment and austerity and unpopular economic policies by the government. These are the unemployment figures which largely match the GDP growth curves. The unemployment rate peaked at around 26% in 2014. Since then, it's gone down to 14%, which is still high, but it's much better than it was. The economy is now growing around 2-3%. So the economy isn't in great shape, but it's recovered enough for it no longer to be the dominant issue in the election. In 2004, Aznar and the PP, they were voted out despite a strong economy. That was all about the Iraq War and the Madrid train bombings. Aznar had taken Spain into the Iraq War. It was an unpopular decision. 3 days before the election took place, the PP were leading the PSOE by about 3-4%, and then the Madrid train bombings took place. And the way that the PP dealt with this was very unpopular. They insisted for days that it was ETA and that it was not connected to the Iraq War, and the people were really angry about this, and there was a last minute swing from the PP to the PSOE, and the PP lost power because of that. The Prime Minister who replaced Aznar was José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero. PSOE got re-elected in 2008, which meant that that was just before the crash. It meant that they were in power when the crash hit. In 2011, you can see that the public were not impressed with how the PSOE had handled the economic crisis, and they decided to give the PP a chance. PP came in saying, we're going to do this, this and this, we're going to do things differently, and then they had to perform policy U-turns. And you can see that in 2015 that the public weren't happy with what they had done either. 2015 was a really revolutionary election in Spain. You had a perfect storm. At that stage, you had 7 years of really bad economy. Both the PP and the PSOE had had a chance to fix the economy, and they'd both failed. There had also been corruption scandals, particularly involving the PP and to a lesser extent the PSOE. So there was and you had the Catalan issue as well. So at this stage there was a real frustration with the two established parties, and you can see that Ciudadanos picked up 14%. A lot of that was because of the PP's position on Catalonia, also because of the corruption issue. And you had Podemos, you see, came from nowhere to 21%. After the election, none of the parties could agree a deal to form a government. All the various permutations of the parties, they either didn't have enough seats or they weren't able to reach an agreement. Now this election took place in December 2015. They needed another election the following June to break the deadlock. But after this election, again, the parties, they still couldn't agree a deal. They couldn't agree for a new government. And it got to September, and it was only in late September that the PSOE, there was an internal rebellion in the PSOE, and they removed the leader, Pedro Sanchez. And they then said, okay, we'll support a PP minority government. So that's what happened. Mariano Rajoy was the prime minister at this stage. He had been the prime minister since 2011, and he continued in a caretaker basis while these negotiations went on. Rajoy's government lasted until June 2018, when the Gürtel scandal came to a head. The Gürtel scandal is about business people paying kickbacks to PP politicians for government contracts. Spain's highest court released its report at this time, its decision, and it was really damning for the PP. It exposed corruption going back almost 30 years. Now at this point, the PSOE, Pedro Sanchez had returned as leader of PSOE in the meantime. The PSOE said, we're no longer willing to support a PP government. We're going to vote against the PP and bring down the government. So they did that, and the PSOE then replaced them. Pedro Sanchez became prime minister. But in order to get the votes, he needed the support of Podemos and also of various regional separatist parties. Now this was really controversial. Ciudadanos said that we will not support PSOE in the future because of this. They were really angry about this. The PP leader, Pablo Casado, said it was high treason. So Pedro Sanchez was relying on this pretty unstable coalition. This was June 2018. It didn't last long. Got to February 2019, the first budget. They weren't able to pass it. The regional parties withdrew their support, and that was the point at which he called a snap election. So that's where we are now. So the figures at the bottom in italics, they are polling numbers. So you can see that Podemos have taken a bit of a hit. They're down from their high point. PSOE are up a little bit. CS are up a little bit. The PP, they've really dropped down because of that corruption scandal. And the real story has been the rise of Vox, who have been taking votes largely from the PP. They've really come from nowhere. I mean, as recently as late last year, they were only on about 4%. They've really benefited from the whole Catalonia scandal. They got a lot of coverage from the Andalusian regional elections. It was the first time that Vox had won seats in a regional parliament. They're a very well organised party. Their rallies are very professional. Their website is the most visited of all the major parties. They punch well above their weight on social media. They have their Instagram account has more followers than any of the other parties. They're second on YouTube behind Podemos. They're number 3 on Facebook. The major stories during the the election campaign itself. There was originally only going to be one debate involving the five leaders, the leaders of the five major parties. This was supposed to take place on the 23rd of April, but some small regional parties objected to this. They said, Vox has never gotten 5% in a nationwide election. They don't deserve to be here. So if Vox are going to be included in this election, in this debate, we should be included too. And they complained to Spain's Electoral Commission, and Spain's Electoral Commission agreed with them. And they said to the TV channel, you've two options. You can either have a debate with the leaders of the four other parties because they meet this 5% threshold. The 5% threshold is significant because it goes back to a ruling in 2011 by the Electoral Commission on who was entitled to take part in a debate. So they said you can either do this debate with the four big parties, but if you want to include Vox, you have to include those other smaller regional parties as well. So in the end, the TV channel decided to go with the four major parties. On Thursday, the 25th, there were two interesting stories. Podemos had their WhatsApp group shut down. WhatsApp said it was because they were abusing the rules regarding automated messages. Facebook also closed down a number of pages that supported Vox. This was after an investigation by an NGO group called Avaz. The issue was what is called by Facebook coordinated inauthentic behavior. It was the use of duplicate accounts and fake accounts to boost posts, basically, and also because of name change violations. Facebook said it wasn't because of the content. So they were the most interesting, most important developments during the election itself. So the election takes place on Sunday. In terms of projections for seats, it looks like PP, Vox and CS will not have enough seats to form a government themselves. 176 is the magic number. It looks like they're going to get about 150. It's unlikely that Vox would actually take part in a coalition. It's more likely that it would be a PP-CS coalition with some type of confidence and supply type arrangement with Vox. There is some resistance from PP and particularly from CS to actually having Vox part of the government. What happened in Andalusia, you had a PP after after the election in December, you had PP and CS formed a coalition and they relied on votes from Vox, but initially CS was a bit skeptical about that. So PSOE and Podemos, it looks like they're going to get maybe in the high 160s, so to be close to 176, and they might get it, maybe a few percentage here and there. If it changes, they might get it, but it doesn't look like they're going to get in. So it looks like the most likely option for a government after the election is going to be another one of these, what are called Frankenstein coalitions, which means PSOE, Podemos, and these regional separatist parties, which is going to be controversial. It's going to be hard to form a government like that, and it's going to be unstable. So that's the situation in Spain. I think I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, and until next time.